Hey friends, it's me again. Never had that happen before. Lip of that pipe stuck on my tooth. This is a VR for Marshal Bailey, who I am very happy to see back on YouTube. I've missed you, my friend. Glad everything's alright. You and Miss Janie are doing well. Glad to see you back. He's doing another giveaway. I'm giving away a print of one of his fantastic paintings. If you haven't seen some of his work, you're missing out. He does some really good stuff. Western themed outdoor paintings typically. He's a very talented man. Very talented man. Multifaceted. Paints, plays guitar, sings, story tells. Does all kinds of cool stuff. Anyway, he wants to know what our favorite family gatherings were. Mine's easy. It's not like Christmas or Thanksgiving or something like that that occurs once a year. It happened every week for as long as I can remember. And that was Sunday dinner at my grandmother's house. She was born in the early 1900s. And she came from a family of, she was one of 9 siblings. Her dad was a preacher, a farmer. He never drove a car that I'm aware of, but he drove a horse and buggy up through the 50s. Got a picture of my grandmother when she was about 7 or 8, probably peeking around from one of the wagon wheels. He's getting ready to go to town or something. She came from that generation that everything was homemade. Everything was homemade. We'd go down to her house on Sunday morning. And it was usually, almost always, me and my brother and my mom and stepdad, and a lot of times my brother and his family would show up, and one of her brothers would show up usually. Sometimes some other folks would be there, but usually there's about 8 or 9 of us. And she would cook every Sunday, every single Sunday. She would cook fried chicken. She would cook some kind of boneless chicken for the kids, like fried chicken breast or something like that. She'd cook a roast, pot roast with potatoes and carrots and all that good stuff, onions. Sometimes she would cook a ham and skip the roast, but most often it was the roast. She would cook fried okra, fried potatoes, green beans, pinto beans, and butter beans. Sometimes mashed potatoes. She cooked 2 pans of cornbread, 1 regular and 1 Mexican cornbread. Dinner rolls. mac and cheese. Make some kind of little jello dish, and she'd always make coleslaw, and about once every 3 weeks that would get left in the refrigerator till lunch was over. And then she'd say, "Oh shoot, I forgot the slaw." She always had ice cream. She usually had at least 2 desserts of some kind. An angel food cake, and either fried pies like fried peach pies or fried apple pies. Sometimes a cake. Usually a pecan pie. We would eat, and we would eat. And there was always enough for supper, leftover supper. We'd eat the same thing, and there was usually enough left over for them to have lunch the next 2 days. I'm probably forgetting something that she cooked. I remember one Sunday she was cooking corn, and she salted it while it was cooking. And then my granddad was always overseeing everything. He walked by thinking she hadn't salted the corn, and he salted it. And then she came back by a little while later and said, "Oh, I forgot to salt that corn." She salted it again. That was some good corn. We'd get there pretty early in the morning usually, and we would watch the Lone Ranger. Well, the Three Stooges would be on, then the Lone Ranger, Cisco Kid. Those were always on. Maverick. This is back when they was in high cotton, because they had just gotten cable, so they had 13 channels. WGN and WTBS was 2 of them, so they always showed some of them old shows. And then we would watch a baseball game, the Braves, unless they weren't playing that day for some reason. Then it was usually the Cubs, because those are the only 2 you could get. Then we'd sit around, do something. We'd usually go out in the backyard. She had 2 massive pecan trees in the backyard. We'd spend hours out there picking up pecans and throwing something up in the tree and knocking them down. She always had pecans. We didn't go without pecans for 30 years. On a bad year, she would harvest 8 or 9 gallons on a bad year. On a good year, sometimes they'd harvest 50 gallons before they cracked them. They'd have like 10 5-gallon buckets full of pecans. My granddad had this old nutcracker. I don't know where he got it or if he made it or what, but the big old contraption. You'd put 1 pecan in there, crack it, and it had like a big screw kind of thing. You tighten it up to just the right spot, and when you push that handle down, it would move it just far enough to crack that shell without messing up the pecan. He'd sit there and crack them, and she'd sit next to him on the couch and shell them. Then they'd freeze them. Could have probably made a fortune if they sold them at the farmer's market, but she never sold a one. She'd give them away. I remember quite a few Sundays of her wringing a chicken's neck out in the backyard. we'd do that. We'd sit out on the front porch and visit during the afternoon. She had 2 swings and all kind of little chairs out there. Somebody would almost always stop by. But those were the days. I miss those days. That kind of stuff just doesn't happen anymore, at least in my life. We'd play dominoes. Some of the best times I ever had was playing dominoes with my grandmother. We'd always get cracked up over something and she'd laugh till she couldn't see straight. Had an old coal shed out in the backyard. My granddad had turned into his tool shed, and that was a wonderland for a 7 or 8 year old kid. He walked everywhere he went. He'd pick up stuff walking down the railroad a lot. He had railroad ties and blades and bolts and you name all, just whatever he found he'd pick up and put in his pocket and bring home and stick out there in the shed. We'd draw bullseyes on the target of that shed with a nail or something. Sit out there and shoot BB guns at it. And one side of that shed was just filled with little pock marks from the BBs. I don't ever remember a bad time or a sour time during those days. It was always fun, always pleasant. One of my mom's uncles would come by just about every Sunday, at least for a little bit. Uncle Clyde. And he'd always have a quarter. He'd have a pocket full of them. He'd always give us kids a quarter when he come by. He probably gave me $30 over the years worth of quarters. Probably more than that. That's back when a quarter would buy something. Anyway, Marshall, thanks for stirring up some memories. I love remembering good times with my grandmother and grandfather. They were, before I had kids and a wife and stuff like that, they were by far my 2 favorite people on the planet. We lost my granddad and it's been 20 years or more now. We lost her in 2010. She was 98. My wife wears her engagement ring as hers. So we always have that little piece. Anyway, my pipe went out, so I'm going to stop talking. And again, thanks for the giveaway opportunity, and thanks for making your way back to YouTube and all that. I keep up with you on Facebook. Listen to your show every now and then if I'm around. Always enjoy it. You, Miss Janie, take care. I'll holler at you later.